Hey, welcome back to the Daily Edge here with my brothers TJ and Todd. Kind of got a surprise topic here. One of the things that I've realized recently, and I wish someone would have told me 20 years ago, is there's no summit to the mountain. This mountain that we're set out to climb in our lifetimes, we are told when we get to this level, we're going to make it. And I spent probably 10, 15 years in my early career where I set the summit. I had my eyes on the summit. Man, when I get to here, and I would say there's two ways to climb the mountain. You can scale the wall. You see the person that's got people dangling from them, and they're just going straight up, the face of the wall. And then there's another way, which is kind of like you're walking along the path with the people you love. And I was a scaler, and I was climbing to this summit. I'd get to the summit and I'd be like, oh man, like what? That's not what I thought it was going to be. And then all of a sudden there was a new summit. So I spent the latter part of the last couple of years realizing that there's just no top. There's no top to the mountain. It doesn't mean we don't climb it. And it's really got me trying to think and understand the American dream a little bit more and what we are seeking and the environment we live in. And what I've come to realize is that I'm not sure we have it all figured out. Like you look at other I said civilizations, that's not what I meant, but you look at like the Amish, for example, who seem to live life completely differently. And the one thing that I've been reminded of as I've reached different levels of financial success, which I don't think defines success, but as I've done that, I realized that I could quit playing the game, or I could have at one point in time, but I choose to keep playing. It's almost like I'm at a casino and I just can't stop. And so I'm curious for you guys, as you think about, Todd, I know you're really focused on progress and purpose and doing things. I feel like there's been opportunities to get out of this game of life from a financial standpoint. How do you guys process that? Because I think it's so closely intertwined with happiness. It's so closely intertwined with what we think we need and the things we're doing. And then you put kids in there and the positioning. And I feel like the rat race is really, really hard to leave.
I wish we could, man. I really do.
Why can't you?
Well, I think that because, as humans, there's the quest for more, right? And who knows if it's something that's wired in us, but there's this quest for more, and it's put us in. Of course it is. Yeah, well, yeah, you're right. And it's put us in this position where it's going to be hard to get away from it, meaning like, we are where we are because we've gotten to this position where, what drives it right now is like, look at the financial markets, right? Look at these companies every single year. It's got to be more. It's got to be more. They've got to make more money. They've got to, because, they have all these people invested in the company that want returns on their money. And so there's this continual push to do that. For me, I'm wondering if there is a biological wiring in our brain that changes over time. And I think what you said is important, right? Meaning like, when we are in this age range versus this age range versus this age range, is it just a building of perspective that's changing our approach to life or our thoughts on it? Or, are we wired at particular times to do particular things? Because I think in your 20s, specifically really in your 20s and 30s, it's just like this grind. And then everybody I've talked to, both of you included, I know you, it's like something clicked like 40s, where it's like, I don't need any of this, man. Like if I could go back and my purpose was building houses, like tiny homes, and that's what I would do.
Let's go.
Right? Like, and I could say, look, you know what? Let's go back thousands and thousands of years where it was trade. And I'm making assumptions around that, right? But like where you traded a good or a service and that's how you survived. Mm-hmm. Let's do that. That is where it's like, if my job was to run around and clear paths in a forest for people to run on. Like, I'm totally cool with doing that versus, the way it is. And I don't know, but I asked a bunch of guys out west when I was out for work last time, and they all kind of felt the same way. Like, if I it's all I need. Just give me that and I'm good.
Here's the challenge though. Like, what's stopping you?
Well, and for me, it's the family dynamic, man. Like, I don't know if you, and who knows, dude, maybe the guys living in the hollers of West Virginia have it figured out. Maybe their families were ultra wealthy coal miners and they were like, this sucks. I'm going to go live in the middle of nowhere in a house that costs $10,000 and be with the homies. And this is what it's all about. Like, maybe that's it. Maybe obviously there are people like, that would be a really interesting dynamic. Like, was there just at some point in time in the history of said family, ultimate success or some realization? They're like, you know what, this isn't it. So what's stopping me, right now is that I feel, I don't want to make that decision for my family. I don't, you know what I mean? I don't want to make that decision. Say, hey guys, this is how it's going to be.
You don't think it's the best for your family, even if it might be the best.
Oh, I think it could be great for my family, but I don't want to make that decision for them because there's a lot of things that go with that.
I think there are two things that biological wiring that stop you and me and you from doing this. I think we really underestimate our biological wiring and the role that plays. We're absolutely wired for progress because everyone else who wasn't wired for progress 10,000 years ago, they died. So our ancestors, the only ones that survived were the ones that were wired for progress. That's how we got here. I mean, you look at society has evolved over thousands of years, hundreds of years, thousands of years. It's just in our wiring. If you didn't make it. And the other, and this is also the case, you didn't make it, is FOMO. If you were kicked out of the tribe, legitimately, if you were kicked out of the tribe, however many thousands of years ago, you died. Like you were dead because it took everybody in the tribe to stay alive. That was a mechanism of protection. It was a life or death thing because if you didn't have the collective skill set of the tribe, there was no way you could survive on your own. You were done. And so the people that were good at that and that was important to them, they stayed a part of the tribe at all costs and they survived. And frankly, because they survived, those are our ancestors. Those are the ones the lineage. So I think those are the two biggest reasons, biological wiring. Not that it's right or wrong, because here's the thing. Today, we live in a completely different environment. It's not life or death. You don't need to be a part of the tribe. You don't need to do this stuff, but we're still wired for it.
You know who did overcome that?
Who's that?
Jesus Christ.
Hey.
Who can hit a curveball? Is this not a spiritual battle? Is contentment not a spiritual battle? Like, didn't Jesus Christ, he didn't come in and have to make more money or find more disciples. Matter of fact, he went against that. He went against that behavior.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about two different things. That was just to explain why I think instinctively the world we live in, why we struggle. I mean,
I'm saying
if we're talking about. Go ahead.
I'm saying that this battle is a spiritual battle. The progress, the biological wiring, all of that. I mean, because this boils down a lot of this to contentment.
I don't know. I don't know for me if it's contentment or discontentment. Certainly there's a discontentment with progress. And I think Jesus felt that too. Like he ran himself, I mean, particularly in his missionary years, he ran himself ragged to the point of being crucified on a cross to have progress from a kingdom perspective, right? Like he died for humanity. To me, he wasn't just living a content life doing nothing out in the wilderness. Like he ran himself into the ground because he had the greatest purpose of all time. And so, I mean, the things that he would town to town to town to town, the miracles, the preaching, the all the things, and dude came under massive criticism along the way. Like, you want to talk about being outcast. Yeah. He was outcast everywhere, but he just continued to
wasn't an outcast everywhere. I think it would be hard to know Jesus' disposition if he was going through like stressed out, wore out, tired. Or
I don't think he was stressed out, wore out.
Life-giving things.
I mean, I think he was obviously very incredibly well balanced. He spent a lot of time in isolation and prayer, and he maintained,
which fed the other side of it.
It
would be interesting, but like obviously he had no material possessions is where I want to go. Like where back, and even biblically referenced the material possessions, the things that will rot and turn to dust is constant warnings of like, those aren't the important things. So do you think because I'm assuming that those are important and they've taken a threshold. One of the things when we were over in Europe that was fascinating was they're like, you Americans just work too much. He was like, you guys work all really hard to buy all these things and like nobody even cares. They drive smaller cars. They live in generational houses. They don't care about all the stuff. They just want to get together and be merry and enjoy one another and make memories.
I would say it's not much about making memories. We obviously spent some time in Amsterdam, and I think that was the big joke, that Amsterdam was like my home. That I loved Amsterdam for some of those very reasons. It's not a very status-driven place. It's a very transactional place. There's not a lot of schmoozing and that sort of stuff. It's just a very straightforward people doing their thing, but I wouldn't say it lacked purpose. And that's where I don't
think it does have to lack purpose.
Right. And that's where, when it comes to work for me, I think I'm not one who's working to buy, my disposition isn't, I have to have this, I have to have that, I got to do this. Sometimes I'm just like, okay, what the heck? But like for me, in fact, 2 of my 3 jobs, I make $0 an hour. So it's not I have to work more to buy more. So, but
you have to, my whole point in that is you have to work because you've got to pay for something, because if you didn't have to, and you didn't have to worry about money, you wouldn't have to work at all.
Yeah. I mean, certainly there's a part of it, but, yeah, I mean, of course we all have to make a living, as do they. And so what your bare minimum is, or what you need to live, and how you want to reinvest your resources for your family or the greater good of the community, I think to me, it's less about how much work you're doing and what type of work you are doing to move the world forward, or how you're using those resources.
Let's ask this question. Do we think it's a cultural maturity thing, because America as a country is so young? That is why, some of these more developed countries, we just had our 250th birthday. A lot of these countries have been around for thousands of years, and you're talking, Asian society, you're talking longer than that. Or is it a function of kind of what you talked about earlier? The people that came here were like wild men. Oh, I'm just going to get on a boat for a couple months and maybe die, and like
batshit crazy.
Yeah, to come here. So like, and obviously we're very, again, competitive, having to win, having to not just fight the elements and fight disease, but also fight the natives and fight other groups over the years. So it's a very resilient bunch. So what is contributing to this continual need for more, bigger, better? Do we see it leaning towards one side or the other?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned, one thing I wanted to point out, it's a great question. And I think to point the more thing, I would separate from hard work. I think that's what I was probably trying to say there, is like, I think those are two separate things.
They are two separate things.
And so like you look at like the Chinese culture, extremely hardworking,
sure,
insanely hardworking, but it's not in I need to buy a bunch of stuff kind of way. It's like they like are searching for something deeper.
Some of them.
Yeah. My question would be, is like personal debt's at an all-time high, that 95% of all people are working and living paycheck to paycheck.
For sure.
Like
probably
that, like, so I think that's the correlation that I'm making. And sometimes the work
societally,
may be
for sure,
purpose driven, but we have to work so hard because we consume so much. Is kind of that's the point that I'm trying to tie together. And that seems to be a widely accepted comment.
It's almost something you have to, I talked about earlier, not wanting to make that decision for my family. It's like almost something you have to find out on your own, because the cliche is that the guy who's always like, there's no summit or money doesn't solve your problems is always the guy who's been there. And it's like you almost have to experience it firsthand. And if you haven't, Tara probably won't mind me saying this, but like Tara grew up in a different social class. Right. And so she hasn't had the chance to go through and see, oh, it doesn't. But maybe, you know, in the next decade, having lived or experienced whatever, it's like, wow, this doesn't matter.
When you were growing up and you had this dream of making a certain amount of money, we were like, man, when I make this amount of money,
100K was always a number.
Yeah. If I made 100K, like I could live however I wanted and do everything.
Yeah.
Then you got there. Yeah. And then it was like, if I made 200K, right? Yeah. And then you probably got there. And then now it's like, what is it? The goal line just keeps moving.
It will always.
Always move. I'm here to tell you, it always moves.
And I never thought that. I mean, you know, you hear that, but again, I think it goes back to like having to experience it firsthand, because you hear that and you're like, there's no way. Like
the house gets a little bigger, the cars get a little nicer, the restaurants get a little better, the experiences, you sit in first class instead of middle class, but at the end of the day, it's like it's all the same.
I think the root of this, like initially I answered that, and I think I took offense to what the Europeans were saying because of the separation of those two things, that hard work is bad. And so, but if I'm looking at the American society in general, I think it's a fair observation. I think people,
say it.
I think people struggle with purpose these days. I think it has become, and I think some of this goes back to our wiring just being so different. Our wiring is for a world that was so very different than this. I feel like a lot of it is tribal. Just to go back to that, I think a lot of it's tribal and fitting in. I don't think it's a number. I don't think it's I have to make this much or have this much. It's I want to have what my neighbor has, or maybe something a little bit nicer, because it positions me from a societal, a tribal, and a status perspective. I feel like that's what drives it, and that's where I think people just get lost, because and you jump when you jump social classes, it's like, what was relative, right? It's all relative. And then you come up here and you're like, and then there's always a social class. Like,
it's like Delta Sky Miles. When you think you're in the front of the line, you're never in the front of the line.
You're never in the front of the line.
You're Diamond Platinum, but you're not Delta 1.
Yeah. Now I'm appalled now. I'm Platinum now. And I'm like boarding in zone 4. Holy cow.
There's no bag stores.
It's unbelievable. I've been in zone 1 for the last decade.
That I think is the crux of it. We've got to figure out how to get out of the race of comparison.
Yeah, you're right. It is. I think we've talked about this. I mean, we've done a lot of episodes now, and I think we've talked about this before. I know we have. I think we did an episode on why the measurement we use has to be typically financial. Like that's the
person we're closest to that. So I was having a conversation with someone, and I'm not going to give any names, that kind of blew me away a little bit. Cross is going off. Must be a good story. And she said, yeah, me and my husband both quit our jobs. And they both had good jobs, 6-figure jobs, have a couple kids. And they quit about a year ago. And they just started doing things differently. They live in a neighborhood, a nice neighborhood here in town. They both get in the car to take their kids to school. They both hop in the car to pick them up. They've kind of stopped the rat race of sports. They're like, they cook meals together, and they're like, man, how did we spend all this money eating out? They're like, I don't even know what we used to spend it on. Like, completely shifted and didn't leave their community at all. Still have all the boys' friends from the classes doing the different things. I mean, they have a pool at their house.
I'm assuming they just stored up a bunch of money. And they're just living off of that.
They stored up, and then they realize they're not spending a bunch of money, because they're not. She drives a minivan, like paid off minivan.
They have zero income.
Yeah, they've been unemployed. Now they pick up some part-time stuff here and there, and they're like, yeah, I think we're going to go back and do some part-time stuff here in November, and maybe work 20 hours a week, or something like that. But like, mind blowing. And then one of my really good friends, like, used to work at a place where, you know, he parted ways, and he spent the last 4 or 5 months just kind of sitting around and figuring out what he wants to do next. But for the number of times that I've had the opportunity to leave the rat race, I never did. I doubled down. And so to me, I struggle with it just as much as anyone else of like, I make enough money to get out of the rat race, to stop the bleeding, to stop the purchases, to stop, you know, I don't need to go buy boxes of cards at $1,000. You know, like I can make the decision if I can, and I can do it and not leave my community. Not saying that I want to quit my job by any stretch, because I love my work too. It's purpose driven, but the need to continually take on more things and do more things, whether it's impact driven or purpose driven. It's like, when I was listening to her tell me that story, I was like, why haven't I made that choice? It was almost like this freeing, kind of like real intentional. And we were talking about sports and like, oh, well, we're going to get back into them, but we don't want to be like 5 nights a week. We really enjoy this time. It just was like, it almost slowed me down. Like it's one of those conversations. I was like, huh.
I'd have to, this goes back to a conversation we had in a prior podcast. I'd have to understand why, like not necessarily stopping the working thing. And I'm going to say this, I think we want to make sure we're conscious of I know this word is overused, of the level of privilege. Like you said, what do they save up a bunch of money? Like, you know, the reason I wouldn't do that tomorrow is I don't want my house foreclosed on. I don't want the cars repossessed, right. You know, and all of the other things that would come with just, oh, we're going to stop. And all of a sudden it's all gone, you know, over a 3 to 5 year period when all the money that is in your net worth or whatever it is runs out. And maybe you figure it out in the meantime. But the other thing is like, you know, we stopped sports and we've stopped like, you know, and we're, I don't know.
They didn't stop sports particularly. They weren't doing 5 nights a week. They weren't doing the incredible, you know, amount of stuff. What's real interesting is I think at any point in time, like we could sell a bunch of stuff and live way below our means.
Yeah.
And build up enough to not have the pressure of having to work so hard to make sure we can keep all this stuff that we have. And that's the premise behind it, is like we live to the limit as a society most of the time, especially during your 30s and 40s when you have, I think those are the hardest years because you're
the worst.
I think 50s is your biggest, like, kind of get over the hump because you have the young kids, you're trying to grow in your career, you're doing all the things. So I think 30s and 40s are really hard, but we continue to upgrade different things where all of us in this room could make different decisions to downsize and to easily take financial pressure off of us, but yet we choose not to. And you've actually put a lot of thought into this.
Yeah, we have. We continue to look for opportunities to do that.
And you have people that have done this, right? Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the logic behind it.
Well, I think that's where I was going to go. A lot of this comes down to the why. One of my biggest concerns is expectations, which, as you said, like, I'm doing nobody any favors. I'm not doing my kids or my family any favors. Because,
me either.
From an expectations perspective, it's like, why? You know, and then the comfort is so good at home. Not only are their expectations getting soured, but the comfort at home is a discouragement to getting out and building relationships and connecting with people and playing sports or doing things outside the home, which is what's going to be critical for future. So I feel like these habits, these habits and these characteristics are being bred off of this insane amount of comfort that they have around the house. So to me, but I think the reason I share that is because I think no matter what you do, you can do it for a right reason or a wrong reason. Mm-hmm. If they want to stop working and pull back on athletics just to sit around and do nothing, I don't think that's any better than working, you know, and running the hamster wheel for a similar purpose. I think what's the end goal? What's the outcome you're trying to achieve is the way to evaluate. It's not so much the what is the why. So if someone is doing that because they want to instill certain values in their kids, they want to live a life that aligns better with their values or their religion, or they want to set a better example or whatever, 100%, I'm all in on that. But I think it hinges on that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does. I was thinking about it. It's like a lot of instances, you talked about tribal earlier, and I think something that kind of aligns to that is kind of being fear-mongered into this is what you have to do or else. But I do agree, just observationally looking at people that we've known or people in general, I think the ultimate goal is being a contributing member of society yourself, or contributing to community yourself, and then your kids kind of being the same way. And, that's why I have such a maybe visceral reaction to like woo-woo shit. When I say that, but I'm like, I know, there's a time in life to follow fish around the country. Cool. But going to shows, jam band shows in specific, and seeing some dude who's 55 selling grilled cheese in a parking lot, like we talk a lot. I mean, seriously, though, that's a real person.
Grilled cheese in a park.
And we talk about that kind of that. I mean, that's like the conversation we've had around Wall-E, right? Where you keep going down this path, and you're eventually rolling around in a motorized cart drinking a soda.
Drinking everything.
That is totally where society's heading.
But it's like, and you know what? I've thought a lot about that, and I kind of like it because the more more people go down that path. It's like everything else, man. It's that same canyon, it's that same principle where things diverge. The easier it gets, the more. I was thinking about that the other day. The more hard stuff we create. We've talked about cold plunging and sauna, and back when people were. It's kind of funny. So you think about back into the middle of the 20th century, right? Middle of the 20th century, a lot more manual labor, right? People are working in factories. People are, X, Y, Z. Well, back then they only had the marathon. And now as it's, that there is a very focused niche of people that do the majority of that work. And now we need to create things that are even harder to balance it out. Now we have to have 250-mile races, and it's like...
So what you're saying is progress is bad.
Well, I mean...
that's really good, TJ. I can't sit here and help but think of Mom. Because Mom, I remember a few distinct things. One is she lived a pretty simple life. Like Mom, it was never about the money. Mom, it was about helping the kids. So you could say she was purpose driven. I mean, not that we grew up without, but I'll never forget when I started to become financially successful, I would come and want to talk to Mom about it. And she was never impressed. I was thinking she'd be like, okay, my son's made it. He's doing good. And Mom would she knew something then that I didn't know. And I so wish she was here to have these conversations now because I understand what she already knew that I didn't know. And she just didn't pursue and she didn't chase and she just lived it differently. And I'm just like, when I think about these other cultures, and this is where Todd will probably challenge me, when I think about these other cultures that focus on relational things. You talk about when we were over in Italy and Greece, and in Greece, these kids would be out playing until midnight in the streets, and all the families would be out there, and they don't work a whole heck of a lot, but they're just the environment and the culture, and they don't need to work a ton because they don't need to produce a ton for the man, to some extent. So there's all this progress in business and all these things really matter. Like, is it a means to an end anyways? Is it any more or less important than a community that just a tribe in the middle of, wherever that just survives off of each other and has a tribe-like atmosphere, or like the Amish? Like, is there really any...
It's funneling us all down into the same... I don't know why I just had this thought. It feels like it's funneling us all down into this very specific skill set. Like as we talk about AI continuing to advance, it's like, what are we all ultimately going to be? If you're not a good sales guy, you're done. Or something at the end of the day, where if you look back, there were all these diverse roles. There were all these different things that people have had to do over the years for a community to succeed. We don't need that anymore, because the one farmer, right, farms for the state or whatever it is, right? The one we've progressed so much and things have gotten so efficient. It's like you walk into some of these factories now, and it's like the 5 guys that are responsible for keeping the machines running, instead of a factory of 3,000 people, it's 100 people keeping the robots running. And so now it's like, you said it, maybe that is it. Military, college, which ultimately, I think most of the people we know, more often than not, what's your degree in? Business, marketing, or the trades. Like, those are now the 3 things you do versus all of the diverse things you used to have to do.
But you could, and I know your wife's talked about wanting chickens, but you could move out into a more sparse area. You could get chickens, and you could.
No, I know that.
You could have your homestead to where you don't rely as much on the system. And a lot of those jobs, like I have a niece, and they have kind of a homestead, and they all do jobs on the farm. I mean, it's stuff like, mowing the grass and, getting the eggs from the chickens and growing the garden and watering this. I mean, there are all these, it's manual labor. It's back 50 years. It's just unwinding the clock. And I say everyone could do that. I realize not everyone can do that, but when you think about certain cultures live life for relationships and families and communities, and they don't buy into the progress flywheel that we have with corporate America and everyone trying to keep that big engine running. There are 2 distinct ways to live, and I'm not sure if I had to argue, I'd probably say the cultural relational, just because that's how I'm wired, is probably more fulfilling and just as good as this one, with a lot more meaning.
Yeah, I mean, it's.
I certainly, from an Amish perspective, and I got to see a lot of them when I drove up. I don't know if you took the same path to the Nerve Invite. I mean, they were everywhere. That was fun to see. And I don't know that their lifestyle choice is any better or worse. I mean, a lot of it comes down to how you look at life and what's the purpose of it. And honestly, it's what the purpose. And we've had a lot of people. I mean, there are some people heavily religious in the Catholic realm that would love to go just be out on a homestead and do their thing. And that comes up very often. But a lot of also what comes up is like, don't you want to be in the circles to be able to influence the world that's heading in a not so great direction? Now, that assumes that someone's going to be meaningfully involved in that if you're going to immerse yourself into it and not a advocate for it. Or to me, that's what it all comes down to. Even from a spiritual perspective, if you're like, hey, evangelization is kind of my game and I want to get as many people to heaven as possible, that's going to be really hard to do out on a homestead.
I mean, are we too far gone? Like, just meaning
is that even
relationally driven cultures versus progress driven cultures?
Yeah, but my point is, are we too far gone?
No.
But here's what I mean by this. Like, you're looking to downsize. I bet and I was talking to one of our buddies, Phil, the other day about this. If you want to buy a house now, even if you want to downsize, just throw $100,000 in the fire. Because, and I was watching something the other day. It's like rates, because most of us have rates, 3-ish, maybe a little lower, a little higher. And I was watching somebody talking about the market. Like, these aren't going down for a considerable amount of time. So depending on the size of home you're buying, you're burning cash to do that. And then you look at some of the acquisitions by some of the larger financial institutions that are buying up all of the land and all these different things, whether that's individuals or corporations. What does it look like now for somebody to go and buy a homestead and start that whole process? Is that even available? Or are we in a situation where you're kind of forced into a different path where, look, you can't afford a $400,000 lot or a $200,000 lot or whatever. You can afford a trailer on a whatever, or you can afford an apartment, or you can afford this, that, and the other thing. And then getting from A to B is getting increasingly more difficult.
I think the way back is to start with the next generation. The hard part with that is like, I think the other hard part of making a change for your family is going away from the things that you desired or that we've worked for or wanted. Like if I came home and told my wife we're selling the lake house, I may not be married tomorrow. I mean, but that's the reality of like, I sell that thing. I mean, that's, I can do whatever I want, but like, that's a choice that we made to continue to use that for kingdom work, to create memories and to invite people into our home. And we've continued to do that. But
I'm ready. I mean, I would love any sort of challenge that we want to take on. Let's
start a YouTube channel and we'll go to the woods and we'll just build it all from scratch. We'll buy one of those like floodplain lots on like in Elwood. It's like a complete swamp.
I got 36 acres out there that we can just stop farming and we can all three build houses there. We can build our own running track. Jenna can teach math. Angel can teach cooking, culinary. And
I will tell you guys,
we'll go back to our roots.
That it's so rewarding to see when you see that biology present itself. Like Kay recently, I've taken them. So to keep the running interesting, we've been visiting different parks, and to see how excited they get about exploring trails by themselves in parks. I'm sure your kids, but like it just, that's ancient. Like that's our ancient biology being like, they used to have to track animals and all of these things and for days and hunting. And you see like somewhere wired in there is this. And now it's like, can we go to this new trail? Can we go to this park we've never been to? Can we go explore in the woods? And we used to do that as kids. We built the forts back there behind the pond and we would go and do those kind of things. And it's so cool to see that. And I would love, it's scary as hell. Because you hear, and you've seen it firsthand with your in-laws, farming is tough. And you see how much effort that takes, 6 hours of sleep a night and 20-hour days during certain times a year or 18-hour days during certain times a year. But man, I can't imagine the fulfillment that those of you out here who have done this get from building a home by hand, and working and doing and learning how to do all these things. I think it'd be a really dope way to live. And it's cool to see that stuff present itself in today's society.
I think one of the challenges with that is what used to feel like progress no longer does. I think about, if you woke up to work on collecting the food to cook your dinner, all of a sudden it's like, am I really doing anything with my life? But that's how it used to be. I mean, your daily interactions were with your, I'm sure there was play involved, but it was like, how am I going to survive today? Where it's like, if I can go through Wendy's and get my food and eat in 5 minutes, I don't have to food and eating is a chore. It's not a process but like your whole life becomes around staying alive and doing those basic things. And I think we would all struggle with that, feeling like progress or like we're accomplishing anything. Like, did I just waste the whole day picking tomatoes and then, going out and collecting eggs and then cooking and
I think after 3 months we'd all be thriving.
Because
I think that's much closer to the world that we evolved in.
But
let's do an experiment.
Cooking a meal would feel like progress. Picking it and growing it and being able to eat something that you grown would feel like
But if you had the ability, and this is where it gets interesting. If you had the ability to innovate to help your neighbor, would you want to? And I think that's why we are where we are. You know what I mean? Like people were doing that and they were providing from their family. They're like, hey, I could come up with this thing and that would let me help my neighbor. And then all of a sudden you go from homesteading to a little bit bigger farm, to a little bit bigger farm, to a little bit bigger farm, to, hey, how do we get everybody to Mars? Which is where we are now. And I think that's like that. I mean, that's probably how it all evolved eventually, is like, hey, we can make this a little easier and a little better. And then it's like, we're realizing that that's not always a good thing. And there needs to be a little bit of back and forth, and there needs to be a little bit of fight. Or you just have a bunch of zombies with crazy mental health issues that just continue down that path.
I can't tell you, like when I do the dishes, like mentally, I'm in such a better place after that. Like just small tasks like that where you're using your hands. It's the same as woodworking. It's the same as Legos. Like we found ways to
Just did one last
substitute.
Yeah.
And it like mentally, but like I think some of that can you imagine? I mean the gratification of like growing your food and picking it and cooking it and then
Building your own
like,
house.
Yeah, I mean you talk about gratification. Yeah, I think it'd be fascinating.
You could
I don't
live
know.
off of very, very little if you get to that point where you have that.
I
The
mean-
amount of money you would need to survive would not be much.
It's just like, but then we go back to like the
50,000
purpose
a
of
year.
life, right? And contributing to society as a whole. Like, in what does that look like?
You don't want to isolate doing that, basically. Like,
Well,
it's
and I
not
don't
an
think you- I
isolation
don't think you-
tool. It's a
Yeah.
because you'd still go to school and you just do things, and maybe at that point you homeschool because your kids work there and they do. There would be an unbreakable family bond.
What is the point? I guess it goes back to like, what is the point of being here?
Yeah, that's true. Because you think about like,
But it's
I
not.
think it would take a lot of soul searching to understand if that was the right decision or not, and what are the roots of it, right? If it's just like, oh, I want to live simpler and not run on the hamster wheel, cool. That would be easier in a lot of ways. Is easier better? Not necessarily.
I don't think it'd be easier.
I think there are aspects of it that are more attuned with probably how we're wired. At least that would be my take. But I look at like, okay, so let's take sports, for example. Sports, you and I probably are more in this camp. We've talked about like taking the opportunity for sports to give kids an opportunity to see how effort and precise effort can allow them to grow and excel in certain areas of life, right? Just like that, proving out that process. That if that all of a sudden was off the table and that kid was curing or nurturing a garden, right? And watering and planting and picking and whatever. And like we ate the food and like that's where I would have to like do some soul searching to feel like, is that right? Is that better?
If you did that, you probably wouldn't have cancer. So if you'd eat the natural food, I mean, that's the
Maybe there's a lot of people out there. I'd have to look at that and see. A lot of people say that a lot of people have died over the cancer over the years, but it wasn't us.
Well, I mean, again, but that goes back to
AI
like,
is gonna progress
but that goes
everything.
back to why we're here. Like, lifespan until a while back had significantly increased because somebody was like, these diseases that are killing us, we need to come up with a way to fix these particular things. And so, again, back to like,
Except for
if
MS.
everybody was on this, I think you said hamster wheel, where it's like, okay, I wake up, I homestead, I go to bed, and this is what I do. And we focus on these other things, whether it's spiritual growth or whatever. Again, I think you're right. Kind of soul searching is to like, is this, if my son or daughter or whoever, and their job is to, like you said, plant, harvest, whatever, a field, a garden, a whatnot, like, is that just it? And maybe it is. Maybe that's it. Maybe that, they are.
think about what it compares against. Like, what are you doing now? What am I doing now? Like,
For sure.
selling cell phone accessories and insuring the more people buy, the better off we are insuring stuff, I know for years, one of my good friends had self-storage units and they were 100% at capacity.
Which is wild.
I mean,
I have
they
two.
just buy it and then they fill it up. And then once they fill it up, they never want to empty it. So they just keep it.
It's wild.
And they keep paying. And it's just crazy. It's just really interesting because a life, when I think about this, now that we've gone down this a little bit deeper, the purpose of a lot of what we do now, the progress of a lot of what we do now, I'm not sure how meaningful it really is. And in a life built around relationships where it's a fascinating topic because I don't think we can uncover it all here. I'm not saying none of it's important, but it would be interesting to experience the other side to understand, like, what is it like to not be in the pressure cooker, to not be as dependent on things, to just live a life that's
Where do you think
a little different.
Where do you think it jumped the shark? Did it jump the shark when it comes to the why? Meaning that, like we talked earlier about, we'll just talk about, like the invention of, we'll use something fairly recent, the combine, right? To help plow a field as opposed to doing whatever by hand. Is it meaning, is the difference in, I developed this so I could make more money harvesting a large, or is it like, oh, I can better society by inventing this thing? Like, is that the point? Because, you go all the way back, we'd be doing everything by hand. Tools didn't even exist at some point. And at some point, somebody's like, oh, these tools, and it probably was, these tools will make this easier for everybody so that we can thrive. People can eat better. They can stay healthier, live longer, whatever. But at some point, somebody came in and they're like, I'm the only one that can make these tools really well. And if I make these this much better, people value this more, and I can be, then the ego comes into play, and you're trying to separate. So we could probably talk about this for 3 more hours.
I mean, I think that's legitimate. I think there's a part somewhere in there, the means became the end. And I think that's very easy to get mixed up. And that's...
Like, does Elon really want to be a trillionaire? Is that what this is all about? Because that's what everybody paints. Or is this like, we've screwed this planet up. We got to get off here. We're all going to die. And I'm really, really, really doing this for the good of humanity. Like, this is why,
He's a perfect example. Like, he didn't have to start SpaceX. He could, hundreds of billions of dollars, didn't have to do anything else. Like, that's someone that seems to be driven by purpose.
But then people...
And for humanity, to your point, he's like, I'm going to use the God-given brain that I have and all the resources I have to better humanity. I appreciate that. So I don't think that, and he's employing a lot of people to do it, to help him to do that. So I think there's some good there. I think the medical field, do you feel, this is going to go really off a tangent, but we talk about life expectancy. Biblically, I know it's hard, but like 400, 500, 600 years, I guess the first question is do you actually believe we were looking at the same calendar year and that they were living a life expectancy that was 3, 4, 5 times what we live? And if so, what they used to eat back then, the simple in the grounds, like the food we eat is so, when Monsanto got involved and they started the genetic modified seeds, and everything we eat is basically a modification. I know there's organic stuff now, but before all the processed stuff and all the sugars and everyone ate natural things, do you think life expectancy was longer?
No.
Like, when did it go down? Or do you think it was just
life
tracked
expectancy
differently?
is more plateaued. I don't think... Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're talking really probably just the first part of the Old Testament. I mean, I'm reading Genesis right now, and I'm 20 chapters in, and life expectancy right after Abraham and Sarah is really starting to get down into more things. So that's tough to say. For the vast majority since then of human history, 40 years old was more of, I would say, a life expectancy, and it's continued to increase. And then it's kind of plateaued. I think it did drop a little bit in the last decade or two. I think the real challenge with that is there's so many variables.
Well, as food quality declined, medical quality increased.
Yeah.
So you're solving for these really awful medical conditions that were killing people when they were 6. Yeah. Somebody gets typhoid fever or whatever.
Or heck, mortality. I mean, a lot of people didn't live past the first year. I mean, mortality rate is 50% for a long time. And people did live into their 70s and 80s and things, but yeah, it's interesting because there are so many variables. Because you pick 10 people and they're gonna all point out different things. I was talking to Julie the other day, Alex's wife, and she was talking about the chemicals in the air, like chemtrails. There's sugars. There's processed foods, chemtrails, Wi-Fi and like internet type stuff. There's, just infinite number of variables that can all or none be attributed to different sort of things. Even talk about like some of the Alzheimer's and dementia stuff and
some of the medications,
gut health medications. What was the thing a few years ago that the kids get
vaccines,
causing autism vaccines? Like there are probably 24 things that have probably been more rampant in the last 50 to 100 years that could be potential carcinogens or contributing to other major diseases in ways it's really hard to isolate.
Well, then it goes back to what we were discussing earlier. I think in that breath, those are the same. It's the same premise around what's the driver. Am I talking about X in a particular light because it gets me more clicks on YouTube, or because I'm selling a product that solves the problem? You saw that with like electrolytes. Everybody got in the electrolyte game, and all of a sudden people are putting out things that, just putting salt in a stick and saying, oh, here it's $5. And oh, by the way, we're, all significantly short on electrolytes, when in all reality, most people eat way more salt than they would ever need to replace and aren't doing near the levels of activity that they would need to do to replenish their electrolytes. But you have, so I think like it boils back down to that. And I think that, you're talking about a bunch of things, and I don't think there's any massive meta-analyses, whatever. But you're talking about a bunch of 0.1%, right? Or 0.5%. And they all add up at the end of the day, but you can get really...
Part of the problem is the human body is so resilient and so adaptive that it disguises a lot of the bullshit. Like it is able to figure out how to adapt and evolve, and it like takes on a lot of those toxins and finds ways to get rid of them. And particularly in certain lineages and heritages or whatever, like that makes it even more difficult because it is so good at that.
It is. And that's how they treat a lot of severe allergies, is exposure therapy. Right. It's like, oh, you have this severe allergy. We're going to introduce this a little bit at a time until your body builds up a tolerance for it. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, yeah, you're right. It's the body is super resilient, and it's very interesting. I mean, you look at a Brian Johnson, who is Mr. I'm going to live for a million years. And I think we talked about it a while back, but the fact that he has like an issue now. He's doing everything, measuring everything, conscious of everything, every little bit of what he puts in his body, constantly getting his levels checked, even having competitions with friends on
He's got an autoimmune disease, doesn't he?
Yeah. And like, he's a part of a community that like, oh, hey, this biomarker, I have the biomarker of a 32-year-old and you're a 33-year-old. I'm better than you are. Like, that's their whole existence. And he's got, an autoimmune disease.
Interesting.
It is.
I think I'll bring us back a little bit. I think it just brings questions to how we live our life. I think individually, we all have a way that we live our life that's probably very different than a lot of other people. I mean, this is kind of one perspective of some of the things that maybe hit home with us about what we're doing and how we're doing it. But I'm sure there's a variety of other perspectives out there that would be fascinating to understand.
When you guys are ready for a challenge, let's do it.
I'm in. I don't care.
It'd be interesting to when you say challenge.
It'll be our homework. Yeah, I mean, let's experiment with it in some capacity. Let's like take a one of our vacations and go and live on an Amish property. I can tell you, there was someone was telling me about a place in Montana that they went, and there's no Wi-Fi, there's no internet, there's no nothing, and let's go live on the land for a week and see what happens.
No, let's take a couple acres and let's build 4 tiny homes or 5 tiny homes and just,
I'll be there tomorrow.
Tara started a garden recently. We're growing some cucumbers and some tomatoes, some jalapenos, whatever. Yeah.
Well, there's a desire there to maybe shift a little bit and try some other stuff out.
It's compelling. I don't know if the grass will actually be greener, but it certainly is compelling and interesting and fun to think about.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, there you have it. We are wired. I think that's something Todd said, for progress and growth and desire and more. There's something about even buying something new and waiting for it to come in, like the new Pixel comes out in a few weeks, and just thinking about it. No, I haven't. That's exciting. So I know there's a lot of desires there, but several cultures and individuals, I think, have found ways to do it differently, and we're not sure it's better, but definitely worth a good discussion. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this episode, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks.